Hey guys, Mr. Milton here. Today we're going to go into our first graphing notes. In this video you should be able to graph lines that are in slope-intercept form, and you should be able to graph horizontal and vertical lines. Okay, there are three forms of linear equations. Okay, the one that we're going to do today is slope-intercept form, and it's the one that we will use most often in this class. Slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. Okay, slope is m, and you can think of this as representing how much the line changes from one point to the next, or moves. Let's say moves, that helps us a little bit more. How much the line moves from one point to the next. Y-intercept is b, and you can think of it as representing the point at which you start when graphing. Always start with the y-intercept. Okay, what is a y-intercept? In general, remember that a y-intercept is the point where the line crosses the y-axis. Okay, the y-axis is the one going up and down. Okay. Alright, so given a few equations in slope-intercept form, or close to it, let's talk about finding the slope and y-intercept. Okay, remember slope is m. You can always find m in front of x. That's where m will always be. It will always be in front of x. So for this first problem, our slope is 2. Our y-intercept is -3. Okay, this y-intercept really, in our equation is -3, but on our graph, just to be a helpful hint for you guys, there's always 0, -3. It'll always be 0 in front. So I'll go through and make sure that you guys see that point as we go through. Okay, number 2, our slope in front of x, -3/5. Our y-intercept, 4. This is kind of tricky for number 3. I'm sorry, and that point will be at 0, 4. Notice that our x is always going to be 0 for our y-intercept, our x-coordinate. All right, number 3 is a little bit tricky because it just makes sure that you know slope-intercept form a little bit. Remember, our slope is always the number in front of x. What number is in front of x? 4. That has to be our slope. And the y-intercept is a number by itself. Well, we don't have a number by itself. So what does that mean that it is? Well, it has to be there because this is slope-intercept form. And really, the main thing about slope-intercept form is that y is by itself, or f of x is by itself. If it's by itself, if y is by itself, it's in slope-intercept form. Okay, and that means there has to be a b here. And so b, if it's not written down, it means it has to be something that we don't have to write down. And if it's addition, we don't have to write down 0. So this is where our y-intercept is. It's at 0, 0. In this case, this is where we get the 0 from. Okay. And then 4 is tricky because, again, people get used to slope being the first thing and y-intercept being the second thing. But remember, that's not how I ever told you. Slope is the number in front of x. What number is in front of x? -3. Y-intercept is the number by itself. Doesn't have a variable by it. Which number is that? 10. Okay, so hopefully you see that those problems aren't super difficult. Okay, now these problems are asking us to identify the slope and y-intercept. The next problems don't necessarily ask us to identify it, but we will need to identify it in order to graph it accurately. So we have y equals 3/2 x plus 1, and we want to graph this equation. We're given slope-intercept form, and so we always start with b. Our b in this case is 1. That's our y-intercept. That means that we should have a point at 0, 1. So we have a point at 0, 1. That's our starting point. Our slope is 3/2. Notice it's not 3/2 x, it's just 3/2. So that means we go up 3, 1, 2, 3, over 2. Because remember that this is rise over run. Okay, just a quick refresher, I think. Rise is positive when it goes up, and negative when it goes down. Run is negative when it goes left, and positive when it goes right. Okay, so this is positive 3, says go up 3. This is positive 2, says go right 2. All right, and we'll want to do that a couple times actually, because 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. We want to make sure our line works. Okay, so you have that. If you have a straight edge, that is great. You can make your lines nice and straight through the points. Okay, and then that's your graph in slope-intercept form. Well, the line is a line, but that's how you graph from slope-intercept form. All right, so we're given the equation y equals -4/7 x plus 6. So here's our b. So we start at 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right. And then we have -4/7 x. Now, anytime you're given a negative, like a computer-generated negative, you see how that is kind of in the middle here. I always recommend that you just rewrite that fraction so that the negative's either at the top or the bottom. I'm going to write it so that's at the top. Because what typically happens is that students see the negative in the middle and then they go down and to the left. But then that makes it a negative divided by a negative. And a negative divided by a negative is positive. So I usually make sure I move it to the top or the bottom. So -4/7, that means I'm going to go down 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 7's positive, so I'm going to go to the right 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. I typically like to do it more than just 2 dots, but if I can't, then you can't. There's not enough space. Even if I said, hey, you know what, let me make the negative on the bottom and go up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and left 7, I'd be off the graph. So this is basically what we can do. So I'm going to make my line through here. Line straight through. Notice how I'm not shortcutting my lines. The lines go through the graph. If there's ever a question that asks what happens at this point, you'll be able to read the graph or the line. Okay, so here's us graphing those lines. All right, so we're going to do this a little bit quicker at the back now to get a hang of it. Again, they don't necessarily tell us to identify the slope and the y-intercept, but we need to in order to graph this correctly. All right, for number 3, our slope is the number in front of x. In this case, the number in front of x is 1. Our y-intercept is the number that's by itself. That number is -5. Remember, we always start with the y-intercept, so at 0, -5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, down. And our slope is 1. That's a whole number, but remember, every whole number is a fraction over 1. So that tells us to rise 1, run 1, rise 1, run 1, rise 1, run 1. You don't have to do that all the way through the graph, but as you do that, okay, then you have your line. All right. Number 4, our slope is -3. It's the number that is in front of x. Our y-intercept, remember it's not written here because we don't have to write +0, is 0. So at 0, 0. And then our slope is -3. And that is a whole number, so it might be helpful for us to put it over 1. And that means we go down 3 because it's negative. 1, 2, 3, and to the right 1. Down 3, 1, 2, 3, and to the right 1. Okay. That's our line. I'll draw through it. Okay. There's nothing new in these next two problems as far as identifying the slope and the y-intercept. So I want you guys to do that for me and bring that to me with your completed notes. Okay? Let's go down all the way to the bottom and look at graphing vertical and horizontal lines. Okay, now this concept can be difficult for people to remember, so make sure you pay attention here. I like to think of this as being very literal. Okay, this first equation says y equals 4. And so the best way for me to learn it is pick any point where y is 4. Okay, remember that y means you're going either up or down. Okay, because y is positive 4, that means we're going up 4. So I'm going to pick a point where y is 4. And if I told you to do that, most people will say, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. And plot a point here. Then I'll say, great, now pick another point where y equals 4. Well, y equals 4 a lot of places. Okay? Remember that this point that we just picked, and I'll just write it here so it's off our graph, is 0, 4. Another place where y could be 4 is here at 4, 4. Or it could be here at negative 2, 4. But notice with all these points that y is 4. This equation basically just says, hey, you need to find somewhere where y equals 4 and draw a line there. Well, everywhere that y equals 4 is here. Okay? We can do the same thing with x. A line where x equals negative 2. Got to find a place where x is negative 2. Again, most people will start here at x equals negative 2 and they'll say negative 2, 0. But x equals negative 2 a lot of places. It equals negative 2 at negative 2, 3. It equals 2 at negative 2, negative 5. It equals negative 2 a lot of places. Okay, all up and down this line. And so up and down this line is our x equals, or x equals negative 2, sorry. Okay, so the quick summary is that vertical lines start with x equals. And remember that when it's a vertical line, they have a slope that is undefined. Okay, because we wouldn't be able to write this in slope-intercept form. Horizontal lines start with y equals, and that's just like slope-intercept form. Actually, you can write horizontal lines in slope-intercept form because the slope is 0. Right? If we wrote this in slope-intercept form, we'd have y equals 0x plus 4 because our y-intercept's at 4. But we would say, oh, 0x is just 0. We don't need to write that. And we just say, hey, y equals 4. So notice that this is in slope-intercept form. Vertical lines can't be written in slope-intercept form because it has no slope. It's undefined. Okay, so definitely have to look at that and remember that a little bit. But with a little bit of time looking at that, you'll have that down in no time. Okay, remember to complete these two examples for me, and I will see you later.